Lately, I've been making a lot of videos about my sermon prep process, how I communicate, how I lead, and it's been fun. It's been really cool to see a lot of you guys unsubscribe who don't care about this, but also I already feel like I'm coming across as insecure, and maybe I am because I've had the same subscriber count for a year and a half. But today, we're going to actually answer some of the questions that you've been asking about my preaching process and my sermon prep, and so let's just jump right in. First question from Adam Smith is, how do you plan out your sermon series for the whole year? Back in the day, I used to not. I just was 3 months at a time. But now realizing so much of vision is actually crafting your people into becoming someone, to becoming into the person and work of Jesus Christ. I am so grateful. I technically, in 2023, planned 3 years out, and now I'm about a year and a half out. What we do at our church to plan out is I go to a cabin, I take out this is my favorite thing actually, I just grab these little note cards and I just start writing away different ideas. And the way we have everything planned out right now is we do 3 practices of Jesus per year, and then we do a book of the Bible in between. So this year, for example, we planned out last October what all of 2024 would look like, and we said, okay, the practices for 2023 were a lot more vertical. It was Formed by Jesus practices. Go to formedbyjesus.com if you're interested. It was Sabbath, Scripture, and simplicity. So we really feared it was a lot of internal, individual, private type practices. So we said, let's do more outward relational practices. And so this year has been a doozy. It's been wonderful, but it's been a doozy. We're doing hospitality, peacemaking, and now generosity in just a couple days. And it's all under the banner of making friends and loving other people. So it's very important for me to have those as like the tent pegs for the year. Does that make sense? It helps carry us through. We view everything. We're starting generosity. Now for the next 3 months, everything's around that theme. And when we do that, I am able to read and gather resources and notice quotes all year long and put them in their perspective folders. It makes preaching a whole lot easier. So I like knowing where we're going, and we're going through the book of Acts. And so that's just been great, just studying commentaries in between. We started it at the beginning of this year, and we're going to end it at the end of this year. That's the quickest version. Comment below if you want a fuller version of that answer. Second question, what kind of resources do you use? I think I'm technically still a partner with Logos. So I start my Mondays by reading scripture, the passage that I know I'm preaching on, and maybe I'll talk about that too. I am never coming on a Monday morning not knowing what passage I'm going to preach. That's just terrifying. But the 3 commentaries I go to the quickest are NIGTC. It's like real heady, real nerdy, helps dive into the Greek. That is not for the weak of heart, but I go to that one. Another one that's a little bit more preachy and helpful, if John Stott has a commentary on it, I am reading it. And also Warren Wiersbe. Warren Wiersbe has a way of summarizing the passage really well. He also likes words like I do. And so sometimes I'm tempted just to take his outline because I know people say alliteration's stupid, but I still think it's cool. Next question. I feel like you have so many catchy phrases. How do you come up with them? Thank you very much. I am wired that way, so to remind myself of something, I try to make sure that it's catchy. This week, for example, let me just walk you through quickly my generosity sermon, how I came up with, it's not the catchiest line, but it's helpful for me. And reading Luke 11 and Luke 16, I started to understand this idea behind Jesus's words that the outside of the cup is clean, but the inside is just poisonous. It's full of wickedness and greed. And in Luke 16, he actually also talks about how you cannot serve both God and money. So I was going through in my head, going on a walk. Going on a walk is step 1. I go on walks, meditating. Hagah is the Hebrew phrase for meditate. I meditate on the scriptures and think through, how do I come up with something where hopefully the takeaway is they both know that 1, it's this invisible poison. You can't see it from the outside. And 2, you literally cannot serve God and money. It's not even as much of a moral statement as it is a reality statement. And so I was wrestling, trying to think through, oh my gosh, greed is keeping us from living the abundant life. And so my first phrase I came up with was that it was an invisible poison. I was just thinking through the idea of this cup and how when you open it up, it is just wretched. And so invisibility was a key word for me as I was thinking through, and poison. So then, to be honest, I was thinking through, okay, I want my next phrase to talk about the other Luke 16. I'm trying to make this into one sentence. I wanted to start with an I and then a P as well. So invisible. And then I was thinking, oh, it's literally impossible. Let me use that word impossible. And so I came up with this phrase. Greed Let's see if I remember it. Not even looking down at my notes. Here's what it is. Greed is an invisible poison that puts you in the impossible position to love God and others. So I love creating one phrase that communicates these two big ideas. I'm going to be preaching. When you see this video, you'll have already seen it. My church has. I am spending a lot of time proving how it's an invisible poison, and spending a good amount of time that it is a impossible position to love God and others, to fulfill your purpose. But I want them to walk away with one statement. So I spend time on it. I write them down. In fact, maybe one of these notes somewhere, I keep these notes everywhere. It actually shows my process. I don't think I can find it. It shows my process of me invisible. Oh, wait, and I scratched it out and tried something else. Writing it out helps make a lot of sense. Comment below if you want me to make a whole video on that. This is idea content generation. Do you care, Tim Hunter? By the way, that last question was from Cordell. Thank you. Do you care much about or put much stock into conversions as an immediate response to your preaching? Ooh. So I am Baptist. I grew up, conversion's the most important thing. And it's weighty because my father and grandfather are legendary at it. They tend to always lead the state in number of baptisms per year. They just have, I believe, a spiritual gift of evangelism. What's hard for me is I love evangelism, of course. I have found, and this feels weird as a preacher, I almost feel like I'm admitting I'm a terrible church planter. Maybe I am. But I have found I'm a little bit more passionate. Not even that. I'm better at discipleship. So let me put it this way. I don't put weight on the moment because I used to in the beginning, and it actually almost became a selfish thing. I wasn't able to see the beauties of how our people were responding. I've also found those who respond silently are usually responding effectively. I used to be so discouraged because I grew up in a culture where everybody walked down the aisle, and part of my leadership probably I need to get better. That's not so much a culture at our church. But then I realized that's so much better than the hypocrite who just comes down the aisle. So we do see conversions, but we see them typically not after a sermon. It's in the middle of the week, or, hey, pastor, I'm really wrestling with what you said. Can we meet for coffee? That happens. Here's my favorite illustration on how I think we should approach the sermon once we are done. John Ortberg gave this illustration. Speaking of Dallas Willard, there's two different perspectives or attitudes that you can have after preaching a sermon. So I imagine this, usually every week I try to make myself think of this imagery as I'm walking down those steps being done off the stage. The first one that is my go-to, natural go-to, is to view preaching like a bowling ball, where I threw the ball, and now as I step off the stage, I am wincing. I'm wondering, is it going to turn in? Is it going to go into the gutter? I'm trying to think, how are people responding? And so you don't even enjoy the process, and you just sit there and wait forever to see if it was a strike or not. That's not healthy. I don't think that's securing yourself in the love of God. And maybe you're feeling that way because you didn't study enough, whatever. A better way is a balloon. So instead of thinking it as a bowling ball that you're wincing and wondering where it goes, John Ortberg says that Dallas Willard, it seems as if after he would preach, it would be like he would go grab a helium balloon and just let it go into the air and then walk away. He didn't even know where it went. He knows he did his job, and he's allowing God to just take care of the rest. Outcomes are none of our business. Now, we can take that too far and not be critical enough of our preaching. We do need to get better. Maybe our closers are bad. And I think of all the things on my preaching, like my closers are the worst. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. I've been leaning into some coaches and some teaching to make sure I'm better. That's my quick response. If you want a video on that, comment below. The M. Lloyd, maybe your name's Lloyd. You asked, how many hours does it take to prep a sermon? I always find that really hard to answer because it's multifaceted. I'm usually prepping sermons months out. This generosity practice, I was surprised how quick I finished week 1, but that's because I was studying it for 6 months. So in some sense, months. In other senses, I have found it usually takes about 5 to 7 hours. I need more time to meet with people, to lead. I also need more time just to be with my family. I hear stories of pastors staying up late into the night Saturday And the person, comment below if you know who I'm talking about, if you're the person, because we've talked about it before. I try to make sure I don't do that. And so I give myself some freedom to still be mulling over the passage. I don't count that as work hours when I'm going on a prayer walk, thinking it through. So who knows what the hours are? Because haggaing, like meditating, is, man, most hours of the day, which I find to be very formative. But actual pen to paper sitting down here on this desk, about 5 to 7 hours. And I think I have a greater answer to that, but there's another question that will help answer what I was about to say. Next question that he asks is, do you use Evernote or something similar to keep your ideas handy? Yes, this is how my brain works. I use multiple things. The first process I use is notes. I use the Notes app on the phone. I usually just make sure I have a header so I can search it really quick. And then, so like this week one generosity, I just have week one generosity. And I just have, let me see if I can show you. I have, week one generosity, and I have a million different I have a million different notes, and this isn't all of them. Those are just the random thoughts I had this week, okay, while I was on my walk. So I use the Notes app. Once they are more official, I go to my computer and I put them into my Notion doc. So I have a Notion calendar. Comment below if you want a whole video on that. So I copy and paste into there, but Notion's less of a dump and more of, okay, let me put it in the right category. And then from there, I might take it to Freeform, which I've already made a video on that. I never know. Go right here. Trey, remember to put that in post. And then I put it into Word doc. That's my process. It's not amazing. It's amazing for me. John Adams, how do you protect your time against all the other demands of ministry? I'm struggling there. That's the question I was hoping that was asked. Here's how I do it. I actually took this from a far-off mentor of mine. I've gone to several of his conferences, and it's the only person I'm still a fanboy of, and I love that he knows my name. He remembers me every time I see him, and he took a picture with me with my book and said it's great, even though he didn't read it. Don't throw shade at him. John Mark Comer mentioned how on Wednesdays, he is actually studying for the sermon that's in 10 days. And on Thursdays, he's writing the sermon. And I've really adopted that a little bit. I am trying, I still haven't really succeeded, of doing that where I'm working 10 days out on a sermon, and then the next day I'm working on the sermon that's in a couple days. I know Andy Stanley is known for doing something similar. So for me, Thursdays are crucial. So from 5 to 11 a.m., I won't look at my phone. I'm not doing anything. It's about that 6-hour window. I'm assuming I'll get it done, and I get it done. So I'm ruminating, studying. I don't count the clock when I'm just reading commentaries. Maybe I should, to give you a better realization of how long the process takes. But sitting down and writing and thinking and researching on Thursday mornings, and I get the sermon done. So that's how I make sure I am not, my attention's going different places. Mondays are for meetings. Tuesdays, comment below. I'm not going to give that away. Do you want a just general big theme, what I do every day of the week? They're all different, and figuring that out helped me so much. In college, I loved college. I loved school because it was so structured. When you become a pastor, especially in my mind, a lead pastor, you have more freedom, and you're like, what do I do with my time? And so I have spent a lot of time figuring that out, and Carey Nieuwhof has had some books on that have helped me tremendously. How often have you reused a sermon? My dad never reuses a sermon. I reused a sermon last month, and that was very rare. When I guest speak, I allow myself to reuse a message. If I am preaching at another person's church that week, if they say preach whatever, I'm going to look in my bag the last 3 months of what I've been preaching and use that. So then I'm going to use that week to get ahead of my sermon prep for my home church. That's the big thing. So in July, I felt this pressure or this calling to rest my mind and to get ahead on certain items within the church. And so I actually guest spoke twice, one at Prescott Cornerstone and then the other at Heart Cry Church, my father's church. I used the same sermon both places. So I preached it a grand total of 5 times. I never want to preach that sermon again. One more question. Robert Reynosa, I miss you, man. You were in my courses and everything else when I did that back in the day. He has 2 questions, and then we'll be done. 1, what do you think of pastors who never listen to other pastors? Part of me gets it, part of me doesn't. I think if you're beginning, I think you should listen to a lot of pastors. You need to be milking a lot of cows, but churning your own butter. And so you need to be understanding cadence. I actually think you shouldn't be listening to it 2x, because you need to realize, how are they flowing? When are they pausing? In my 20s, I ferociously consumed sermons. More recent days, I am selective with who I listen to, and I realize books are more powerful for me than sermons. So I try not to listen to too many sermons, except a few of my favorite pastors. In my mind, they're pastoring me. I don't know what I think about them. I think if you're young, you should do it a lot and realize you don't have a voice yet, so listen to a lot of different voices. But I understand those who've been doing it for a few decades and they know who they are. And yeah, books are better. How do I make more sermons more about Jesus? Woo! Oh man. Exegetically, every passage, right? Everything points to Jesus some way, the redemptive arc of Scripture. So that's number one. I actually have a list of things I have to do in every sermon, and one of them is make much about Jesus. One line is, if this works in a non-Christian church, this is not a good sermon at all. And I honestly, one of my sermons recently, the one that I preached a couple times, my task at the church at Cornerstone was to preach on David and how he encountered discouragement with Shimei. And I could have kept it so TED Talky, right? Like how to have courage. But I made sure I pointed to the fact the ultimate person who endured mocking and scorn and did not retaliate in kind was King Jesus. There's always a way to bring it back to Jesus. I try not to make it a cliche way where they know, okay, he's going to talk about the cross. I want to subversively shock them to show how this connects to Jesus. But sometimes it's great. Just take it beeline to the cross. Totally. Thank you for this Q and Trey on preaching and communication, prep work. Comment below if you want any of these ideas to be further developed into longer form videos. I so enjoy helping you. If you don't know me, I planted a church about 9 years ago. I've been on YouTube for about 7, almost 8 years, up and down, and I just want to help people like you who are just trying to faithfully preach or lead in the way of Jesus by living the lifestyle of Jesus. Thank you for watching today's video. This is the video I think you should watch. This is the video YouTube says you should watch.